Hello, my name
Here
is
is a
Keith
study
Thompson.
conducted by JP Morgan Chase. And in this study, what JP Morgan found in their asset management division is that individuals who are between 35 and 44, so let's say midpoint of 40, late 30s, early 40s, will spend about 40% of their income on housing, about 7% of their income on healthcare, whereas those who are 75 and older will spend about 16%, so 9 percentage point more on healthcare. But on food and beverage, retirees will end up spending a little bit less, but they'll end up spending a lot less on transportation. Again, they don't have to commute to work, etc., but may end up spending more on gifts and charity. The other thing to look at is they also looked at the average inflation rate of the major categories over this time. Healthcare, the fastest rising category for the previous 40 years, but actually fell in 2024. Housing increased in 2024, but relatively modest, tracking inflation the previous 40 years. So these are all interesting numbers. And as you can see, the overall rate of inflation over that 20-year period has been relatively consistent. So what do we make of all this? Well, what we make of all this is the following. What percent of your current income do you need in retirement? Notice that for those who are between 60 and 64, on average, they're spending about $75,000 a year. But that number keeps declining as retirees get older. And so by the time they're 90 to 94, they're spending just under 52,000. And that number barely increases, relatively flat as they get to 95 and older. So as individuals retire, their total spend consistently declines to a low of $52,000 on average. Naturally, healthcare is the largest expenditure, and it doesn't really change even with throughout the years. Your dollars spent roughly stays the same. Charitable giving increases. Housing costs is roughly the same. Food and beverage, their spending decreases. Transportation, their spending decreases significantly. Others, relatively flat. So whereas we think we're going to maintain a certain lifestyle in retirement, it is very shocking indeed that the total spend does change dramatically. And it does challenge that assumption that you will need roughly the same amount in retirement as you do need right now, because the data does not quite support that. The other thing the data doesn't support is look at how it breaks down by income. So individuals at the low income spectrum on average will need more in retirement than they're currently earning. So their replacement income is actually above their current income right now, which suggests that they will need some form of assistance, say government assistance, etc. But as individuals increase on the income scale, the amount that they need to replace in retirement significantly declines. Significantly. Why is that? Well, if you look at how much they have saved in retirement from private sources, approximately 40% across the board. So whatever the income category, it's approximately 40%, whether from their private savings or from employer provided sources, including pensions, etc. 40%. But when you look at how much they rely on Social Security, unnaturally and understandably, the number is larger the lower one's income, that they rely more on Social Security. And as they get wealthier, they rely a lot less on Social Security. So why is it that high income individuals have a lower income replacement level? Because they are able to adjust their expenditure levels, and they're saving on taxes, and they're saving on pre-retirement savings, meaning they don't have to save as much in retirement. So they're reducing their spending and savings and taxes by 45%, meaning that they only need to replace about a little more than a half of their current income when they retire. It's a very interesting insight, and one that the more we delve into this, the more it gives us an insight into how much we need to save in retirement. And so with that, this now beckons for us to take another deep dive into the model itself and look at how we calculate our replacement income. So this is a model I've developed that looks at, there are three types of expenses that every individual incur. There is your fixed expenses, your variable expenses, and what I call your work expenses. Sorry, let me go back here. Your work expenses. I'm just finding something. Your work expenses are those expenses you incur while you're working. So I want you to think about this. What expenses are you currently incurring that you will not incur when you start to work? Naturally, you don't need to contribute to your retirement savings accounts when you're not working anymore. So let's assume you're putting 10% currently towards your retirement savings. And let's assume you're paying for health insurance, right? On average, we pay about $9,000 in premium to our health insurance. So if you're making $100,000, 9% of your income. In retirement, you will be paying some premium for Medicare, but it will not be anywhere near the amount you're currently paying for private insurance in your pre-retirement days. So you will be saving substantially on no longer saving for retirement and no longer paying for health insurance. But there's also huge savings that we incur by not commuting to work. So here I put a model in place that calculates how many days I drive into the office. If I drive 20 miles each way to work, then over the course of a year, I'm using the IRS standard mileage for reimbursement miles. If you get reimbursed for work, it would cost you about $6,300 each year just commuting to the office. And let's say you commute and you take mass transit 1 day a week. Maybe for you, it's more than 1 day a week, but I just put an average 1 day a week just to give a flavor to those who might take mass transit. So you still have to commute, drive to somewhere, park your vehicle, and then take mass transit. In that case, assuming it costs you $30 for mass transit, it does for me if I'm commuting into the city, and then I'm paying for parking, then the cost would be this. And then imagine also if you're 3 days a week, I'm assuming you don't buy lunch every day, you don't get a cup of coffee every day or something, but if you do occasionally 3 days a week, it costs you $15. It might cost you more. Hey, if you go in the city, it definitely costs you more. Then this would be your total cost that you would be saving by not going into the office. Because let's face it, you can make yourself a cup of coffee at home. You're retired now. But you're also saving in payroll taxes. You're not working anymore. You don't pay payroll taxes. You might also be saving in income taxes. Now, it's true, when you are withdrawing from your retirement savings account, you will have to pay taxes on your traditional accounts, like your traditional IRA and traditional 401k. But the delta between those two could still be a substantial saving.